All right, our final speaker is Sister Stephen Patrick Joly. She's a perpetually professed member of the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist. She earned her Ph.D. in cell and microbial biology from the Catholic University of America in 2018. Her dissertation was titled Identification of SUP5, a protein that interferes with the deviant ATP binding site of the yeast PDR5 multi-drug transporter. Sister Stephen Patrick is currently a high school science teacher at Lansing Catholic High School and has taught honors in general chemistry, anatomy and physiology, AP biology, physical science, and meteorology and astronomy. She is a member of the Society of Catholic Scientists, and her talk today is Understanding Evolution with St. Thomas Aquinas.
With this group, I don't think I really need to make a case for evolution. However, if you do a quick Google search, you'll find common misconceptions of evolution. It's just a theory, or humans are descended from monkeys, natural selection is purposeful, religion is incompatible with evolution, or evolution disproves the Bible. These are all pretty common things that we've heard, experienced, and misconceptions that we actually try to combat as well. And I had the opportunity just probably about a month ago now, to talk to my anatomy students about evolution. And pretty much, yeah, those misconceptions are there, right? When you look at it, they especially were stuck with this question of, well, if we came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Or I don't understand the whole monkey thing. They really were obsessed with the monkeys. So we took some time to talk about monkeys and DNA and then those types of things. But it just kind of shows, yes, there definitely is a need to talk to our high school students and even younger about what is evolution, like what are the actual scientific facts of it, but also how is it not in conflict with our Catholic faith. So the signpost, we've seen already, there's this common perception that you either are a person of faith or a person of science. I love being a Dominican science teacher because just walking into a room, I'm a walking contradiction. One of our Dominican mottos is contemplare et contemplata alis trare, to contemplate and to give to others the fruit of our contemplation. This came, our brother St. Thomas Aquinas does this very well, where you can seek truth everywhere. And our Dominican friars actually did this in the realm of evolution in our faith. Several years ago, they came together as a team of philosophers and theologians and scientists to compose a book of essays in 2016. And so you might have heard of it. It's Thomistic Evolution. They've put out a first edition as well as a second edition. It's fabulous. I would highly recommend it. They didn't ask me to tell you that. And going along with it, there's also a website that you can go to just as a way to lay out some of those key foundations. So this might be an awesome resource for you to take back to share with others. It's just ThomisticEvolution.org. And as you go into the website, there's a couple of different pages that you can go to. There's featured essays. This is pretty great because here you can find basically a one-page front and back PDF, which they designed as almost like bulletin inserts on all of the key topics that they bring up. What is faith? What is science? What is reason? How do they go together? What is the scientific evidence for evolution? How can God create in an evolution manner? Those types of things. So if you're ever in dialogue with someone, this might be somewhere you could go. They have links to other resources that are available. They have something called a disputatio. This is pretty fascinating, actually. They take some key questions, and they have someone responding from the Thomistic evolution perspective, the intelligent design perspective, and I think the creationist perspective. So they're all answering the same question, and you can spend time reading those essays to see how does each side actually respond to it. Something that definitely was done by my brother St. Thomas and St. Albert. What I'm going to be talking about is my work in creating high school resources, high school curriculum, which takes Thomistic evolution really to the high school level, and there's a big focus too to actually bring it into the homeschool community. What Father Nicanor Austriaco realized when he was producing this work is really homeschools don't have access to Catholic teaching on evolution. Oftentimes there's really great homeschool networks, but they tend to be very Protestant in their origins. And so this is kind of a way to get the Catholic thought into homeschool communities in particular. So in 2019, Father Nicanor earned a grant from the John Templeton Foundation as a way to further the Thomistic evolution book that he and his team of friars had written. And so this grant is really, the purpose of it is to make it more accessible to the general public. So there's 3 teams that he has established as a part of it. One of them is the theology team, the philosophy team, and then the high school team. And the theology and philosophy teams are really focused on studying specific questions of evolution in those fields, writing academic papers. I think they have goals to write 6 to 8 academic papers on key questions in the field of evolution, as well as putting on conferences, about 2 to 3, just to be able to share those ideas with others. The high school evolution team, our purpose is to create high school resources to help our teachers, students, and homeschoolers understand how God was able to create through evolution. So here is the first meeting, the only in-person meeting so far of our team. You can see it's a team of Dominican friars and sisters, all of us scholars. And we came together for the first time in 2019. We had a great brainstorm. We threw out tons of big ideas on what we wanted to do. And then this past year, we weren't able to meet, of course, because of COVID. And this summer, we'll be meeting in smaller ways to be able to work on those resources. But a couple of members of our team, I think some of them you will recognize. We've got Father Nicanor Austriaco, who is knowledgeable in both the sciences as well as theology. Father Thomas Davenport, who is knowledgeable in his physics. Father John Baptist Koo, who has got his theology. I have biology in my background. Father Jordan Schmidt is our biblical scholar. Sister Mary Elizabeth is bringing some theology as well as science background. And then Father Humbert, who brings some mathematical wisdom to our team. So all of us Dominican, all of us scholars, and really an amazing fruit of this collaboration is we each have a specialty that we're able to bring together to collaborate and really bounce ideas off of each other to make it a strong resource. So as I was getting ready to come, I just thought, well, you might not argue why do we need these, but I did have a couple of people ask me on the street, well, why would you need to create high school resources for Thomistic evolution? So I'm just going to give you a couple of slides of stats, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, but it just kind of frames that question a little bit closer to home. 79% of former Catholics are leaving the church before the age of 23. That's coming from the Pew Research 2015, I believe. 50% of millennials raised Catholics no longer identify as Catholic, so half of the people that I went to school with are probably not identifying as Catholic, and I think I can see evidence of that in my own life. Only 7% of millennials raised Catholics are still actively practicing. 90% of our American nuns, not nuns, but nuns, who have left religion did so before the age of 29. And what's really striking is when you look at the percentage breakdown there, 62% are leaving before the age of 18. And I've even heard really our 6th graders are making that choice to leave their faith in our culture at this time. So the more that we can equip our teachers to actually be able to speak about our faith and how it is compatible with our science, I think that can be a way to help bridge that gap. 60% of our nuns have stopped believing in the church's teachings. These resources came from Brandon Vaught, who works for Bishop Barron's Word on Fire initiative. Another source that I found is from the Barna Group, and they're kind of giving some reasons on why they're leaving. So one of 6 major reasons for leaving the Catholic faith is that 35% think Christians are too confident they know all the answers. 29% think the church is out of step with the scientific world that we live in. I think we've seen this weekend that's not necessarily true. 25% think Christianity is anti-science. 23% have been turned off by the creation versus evolution debate. And then among the church-going teens, 49% think that the church seems to reject too much of what science tells us about the world. So again, so much of this is just that perception of what they think is true, which is why we need to be talking about the actual truth more. And then Father Spitzer, who works with the Magis Center, has some wonderful faith science resources out there as well. And he makes the point that really the majority of our young people are leaving religion due to the intellectual problem of science and faith. So there's 4 intellectual topics that tend to give rise to doubts. One of them is the perceived contradictions between God and science. Another is the lack of evidence for God from science and logic. The third one is the implicit belief in a metaphysical materialism. I'm only a bunch of atoms and molecules, nothing more. And a general disbelief in the historicity and divinity of Jesus. And then he makes another point for reasons that young people are leaving is more of an emotional, and it's that question of why would God allow for human suffering? So he has resources to help reach young people based on these criteria. So with our project, we are just proposing a way to bring Thomistic evolution into the high school. If you are aware of high school education, I can just speak from going from grad school into high school. It's a very big change. I just remember that first year of teaching, there's no time to think. You just there's so much demand that's put on the high school teacher, where you're teaching between 2, 3, 4 different classes. You have maybe up to 156 students, and it's just a grueling day. You go. And as a teacher looking at adopting new resources, my biggest thing is I don't have time. I don't have time to study and learn something. I don't have time to look and see what's available. So as we're creating these, we're keeping these things in mind because you want to be able to, well, first of all, engage our students in open and thoughtful discussions about faith and evolution. But to do that, we also want to help the teacher out and create resources that are easy to just pick up and implement right away. We want it to be flexible. Time is also hard. I don't think any high school science teacher ever says, I have way too much time in a semester or in a year to be able to teach all of my curriculum. It's always very challenging just to teach what you're already required to be teaching. So how can we make it so that as you're teaching about evolution, you can have some sort of resource, even if you don't use everything, to get some main points across to your students. We want it to be something that can just stand alone or be used as a whole. So very much a flexible piece there. And of course, written at an appropriate level of understanding while conveying the richness of the philosophical, theological, and scientific truths. And I think you can see as you look at some resources that are already out there, as hard as you might try to make it understandable, it is challenging to put some of these concepts in a way that's easy to understand. And something that we keep going to is we need to educate the educator. And it's funny that I'm part of this team because I kind of feel like, okay, when I feel like I actually have a good grasp of it, we might actually have a good product. Because I'm very much learning it as I go. I'm not as trained in theology as my colleagues, so that's definitely something we're able to do. So our actual product, we've got an idea that we want to have a track for theology as well as for biology. They start at a common place of looking at really science and reason, faith and reason, and then they kind of branch out, but hopefully will link to each other across. So we want the theology teacher to feel confident in being able to talk about the science of evolution, but we also want the science teacher to be able to speak about our faith and some of those philosophical principles to help us understand how God can be creating through that evolutionary mechanism. And so there's the two parallel modules that kind of align with each other. And then each module will have three main sections, and each section of that will contain ideally a one-page summary, so something that you could, as a teacher, hand to your class and have an in-class reading and discussion or guided notes to go along. We like to create something called like pogles or activities to help you more engage with the text rather than just a direct way of learning, but actually a way of experiencing that learning more deeply, as well as discussion questions. Our current status, well, evolution takes a long time, and for us, creating these resources is taking a long time. So we had a lot of goals, and as full-time teachers and full-time members of our team in other areas, we haven't moved as vigorously as we would have liked, but we've been working pretty hard the last 4 months on weekends, and we've created a text for most of Module 1, Faith and Science. We've used and tried some of those portions of text in the classroom already. We've been able to commission an artist. This is one of his designs that he's done for us. We've created a classroom poster, something that you could take up to your wall to show to your students. And then we have big hopes for this summer, just to be able to actually work out more of the drafts of the future modules. Sister Mary Elizabeth, who's with me, was able to pilot that first biology side module, so those first 3 sections on faith and science. And basically, she had good success. She walked through the questions of what is faith, what is science, how are they compatible, and after she did that, she actually gave her students a test on it, and they were able to answer each question with about 80% accuracy. There were about 56 students in her class, and they learned the material. I would say there's multiple choice questions with that, and there were only 9 questions that she assessed them on. And I was asking her, well, what are your major takeaways from your pilot? And she said, well, students definitely have misconceptions, which I definitely experienced with my own. But there's also this really desire to know and understand. Like, they have a curiosity and they want to go deeper into it. So you definitely see that. And she saw that they're actually able to understand when you help them reason through it too. Starting with what is science gives the foundation so that they can understand the issues with scientism and why science can't study God. So ideally this would be at the beginning of the year, but we did it at the end of the year for our practical sake. And ideally we'd want to see this, being repeated almost year after year to lay that foundation for our students on what is science. And then she pulled out some things that we need to clarify from these first sections on what is reality. So 3 out of 4 classes just thought reality is my own perception. But in discussion, she was able to get the students to say, oh, yeah, I do think that there's something objectively outside of myself, but that's not my experience of what the term means. So this shift in understanding of terminology we'll have to be aware of and address. So we're getting close to the end. I just want to say a couple things on how you can help. One of the fruits of being a member of this conference in this group is you all have expertise and experience and connections, so we would love to get your feedback if there are thoughts, ideas that you have for what might be helpful for us as we create these resources. Specifically, as we hopefully start piloting in the fall, if there's connections to teachers that might be interested either in the biology or the theology side, as well as homeschool communities that might be open to piloting this type of resource, that would be some amazing connections to make. One of our big ideas is getting scientists to share their faith and witness and having videos of that. I don't know when we'll actually get to it, but just you being able to share your faith and witness as a Catholic scientist, I think, is huge for our young people. and of course praying for us as we create these resources, just that the Holy Spirit really might be driving the work, because it is a challenge to put it at the right level and to really reach the human heart. As we've been creating these resources, what strikes us is how much studying evolution and trying to make that attainable really brought Sister and I both closer to God in a deeper way of what is the purpose of being human, and wanting to really convey that to our high school students. Like, God created you with a very particular purpose. Yes, he can create through evolution, but he loves you very intensely, and that's why you're still here. So with that, I just want to acknowledge some members of our team, Father Nicanor Austriaco, for really all of his leadership and procuring the grant and calling us to be on his team. Father Thomas Davenport and Sister Mary Elizabeth have been working very hard these past couple of months in particular in trying to create the resources. Our grant manager, Mr. Andrew Kubik, as well as our artist, Mr. Noah Gutierrez. I have to thank our friars and our sisters, the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist, for allowing our communities to collaborate on this effort, Providence College for hosting us, as well as the John Templeton Foundation for their support of the project, and each of you. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Remove my persona here. So first of all, would there be a way for us to buy that beautiful poster for ourselves?
Well, that's actually one of our deliverables.
Oh, good. Okay.
It's actually, we were thinking when we were talking to Father last week, he's like, it's too much information. We need to separate it out. But when we were creating it for this conference, our idea is this is what we want to take to put on our wall. So yeah. I would say I think that's definitely a possibility.
Okay, great. And then my question is, I found after giving talks to the Catholic public that I often have parents walk up to me saying that their child, their son or daughter, had come up to them and said, well, in science class we were taught something that's obviously in conflict with Genesis. And the parent says, I couldn't answer that question, and it was clear that because I couldn't, my son or daughter had lost their faith, or maybe that was the rupture, perhaps. So is there any thought to some sort of adult education program for Catholic parents so that they don't give answers that actually contribute to the departure of their children from the faith?
That's an awesome question. I think it could definitely be one of our huge future goals of wanting to create something like that. I think what's exciting about this resource is it's for the high school student, but honestly, if it's attainable for the high school student, it's attainable for the average adult. And our goal is really to have these resources available and free on our website so that you can go there and download them. Something else that's come up is in being able to get this implemented in schools. Sister and I want to go around and actually help do professional developments and train educators. I think there would be a place too for invites for just speaking to parishes and that sort of thing to give that type of background. So it's definitely a very good point.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was really very interesting. So in my experience with teaching evolution to high school students and interacting with them, they don't really have a problem with evolution by natural selection. So you can give the example of antibiotic resistance or, new COVID variants or something like that. That makes sense. But I think that the hard thing that people have is how did God create humans through evolution? So I think that's like the hang-up. Because you brought up the thing about, humans evolved from monkeys and students have a hard time with that. So I just was curious, do you have a response to that? Other than just kind of leading students through that reasoning step by step?
So maybe it's just my simplicity, but um, in our last module, we actually want to go back to like the Big Bang and really show how all of creation has come to be, all of the universe, and those steps and those questions that we were talking about, like how do you get to life? And there's just this beautiful continuity. So as I was walking through just those kind of natural steps, it's interesting because the students can kind of see, okay, that makes sense, that makes sense. And molecular biology in particular has given us pretty strong evidence in the terms of just, it's pretty hard to say evolution doesn't have support, whereas it used to be, well, there's gaps in the fossil record or, those types of things. So often just pointing that out, I think they see it's reasonable, but it's not necessarily a head problem. It just seems so contradictory. And so what I really see in the students is, yes, like I agree, evolution, not a problem. I don't think it goes along with my faith. And you see that in the general public too. So I think that's just the narrative that they've received. And that's something where we just have to keep talking about the truth and putting it out there. And hopefully the more that we can put it out there, they can be confident in it, especially if we can get our high school students confident in that. Because as a high school teacher, I think the most important thing I can do is really establish a relationship with my students so that they trust me. And once that's there, I can teach them, I can lead them, and we can have further dialogues. And if they have that conviction, I think when they encounter the doubts in the public sphere, they might have a little bit more to say. But no, I can't say that I have a quick fix or anything like that. I think it's just a process of really speaking to individuals and helping them along. And I tried to have a very open classroom, because I could see it. There's definitely some that are totally like, evolution's okay. Others like, why is she talking about evolution? I mean, I had everything in my classroom this past month. And just really even being honest enough to be like, yeah, I don't think there's scientific reasons against it. It's just, it's all faith-based. Like, it just doesn't seem to work. So taking the time, if they're open to walking through the scriptures and explaining actually what is the purpose of the scriptures. But I kind of felt weird being a theology teacher in my science classroom at that point, but you might have some of that flexibility in your Catholic school too. It kind of varies from place to place.
All right, let's thank Sister Joly once again.